Good morning. My name is Douglas Griffin. This is my Sunday school class. It's July 28th of 2024. We are in the book of Numbers, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. I'm not saying those because those are the first four books of the Bible. We started on Genesis chapter 1 4 years ago, and we're just going through the books of the Bible. And these are the longest. These are long. So we've done like a book a year, which would mean, oh, good, in 54 years. But actually, on Wednesdays, I'm going through the New Testament. Still, it doesn't have to be a book a year. It will go faster because there are shorter books. But this stuff is foundational. That's why God spent so much time on it because it explains the whole rest of the Bible. In Numbers chapter 16, okay, so just to remind us, children of Israel are in Egypt. God sends Moses down there, let my people go. And they come out of Egypt. Um, God brings them to Mount Sinai. He gives the law. Here's what you have to do in order for me to preserve you and keep you alive so I can use you as a peculiar people, as a special people to ultimately be a beacon to the rest of the world. I'm going to use you as my test case and so show everyone here's what it's like when you serve an actual real God, because all these other nations are just worshiping made up gods. But here's the difference. So they said, "Cool, we're with you." They go back. Uh, he leads them to the promised land, where he initially made the promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now they're finally on their way back, and they decide not to go because they were giants. So now we're in the aftermath of that. So now they've kind of been sentenced to, well, for the next 40 years, he'll just be stationed in the wilderness. There's a generation of non believers, a generation who are so steeped in Egypt that you can't make the transition to the next. And that sometimes is true. Sometimes we can get so stuck in Egypt that when God's trying to take us to the next phase, we can't go with him. Even though if we think we want to go, but we can't go. So he says, okay, that generation will have to die out. But I'll still feed you and provide you and all that stuff. But you won't survive in the new land because there's new type of thinking that you'll need to in order to survive in the new land, and you don't have that. For example, you have to like obey me when I say do something. You won't survive in the new land if I say go up against Jericho and you go, nah, don't think I'm gonna do that. So I need people who haven't been steeped in Egyptian ways. I need a new generation. So for the next 40 years, there you are. Now, Numbers chapter 16. So they've set up camp in the wilderness. And here are the repercussions of that. In Numbers chapter 16, verse 1, it says, now Korah, so this is Korah's rebellion. In fact, I call this, you take on too much. Um, this is Korah's rebellion against Moses. He's being challenged. I think this is the first time a specific person has come out and says, I'm challenging you for leadership, Moses, leadership of the wilderness. So now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi. So Levi of Jacob's 12 sons, right? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. He has 12 sons. Levi's son number three. And from his line comes the Levitical priesthood, the book of Leviticus. All the priests come from that line. So he's saying, I'm from this line of Levi. I'm a priest, but my dad was Kohath. My grandfather was Kohath. Uh, well, I'll get to it. Anyway, they give his credentials. So Korah is a Levitical priest. He's one of the people challenging Moses. And then it's Dathan and Abiram, who are the sons of Eliab, who also are from the tribe of Reuben. So you've got people from the tribe of Levi, and you've got people from the tribe of Reuben who are challenging Moses for leadership. So it's interesting. Moses is from the tribe of Levi, and it's his own people. And often, sometimes it can be your own people who are challenging you, right? Other people are like, okay, fine, you can have that leadership. I don't want it. But sometimes it's your own people that can come up against you. So they took men, and in verse 2 it says, and they rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, representatives of the congregation, men of renown. Like they're trying to say, these are the leaders. He didn't just get a bunch of ragtag discontents over there. He got 250 of the leaders to challenge Moses. And they gathered against Moses, verse 3, and Aaron, and said to them, you take too much upon yourself. That's the title. You're doing too much. For all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. So his premise is, we're all holy. So why are you doing so much? We're all holy. Where'd he get this from? Now, in Exodus chapter 19, when they first got to Mount Sinai, a year and a half earlier, when they first got to Mount Sinai, God appears on the mountain, thunder and lightning, and he comes down, and they're finally meeting a real God, because none of the gods of Egypt, which they had worshipped for 200 years, were real. So here's what it's like to come face to face with the living God, the real God. He's thundering, he's speaking on the mountain, and he tells them in Exodus chapter 19, verse 5, he says, if indeed you'll obey my voice and keep my covenant, so these are conditional. If you obey me and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine. But I have selected you, like I said, to be that test case. But you got to obey my voice. And then verse 6 says, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, like all of you will be holy. And a holy nation. I could have just read the next words. You should be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you speak to the children of Israel. So this is where Korah and these guys from Reuben, but the Reubenites are just there. We'll talk about them later. They're just there. They're just yes men. They're just there. It's really Korah and the Levites challenging Moses. Like, we're all holy. God just said so. Well, first of all, it was conditional. But secondly, in the very next chapter, in Exodus chapter 20, starting in verse 9, once God was done making his offer, like, I'll make you a holy nation, you'll all be priests, that's what I want, each of you to have your own individual relationship with God. That's what we have today. We each have our own individual relationship with God. Yes, there are teachers, there are priests who God has gifted to explain the word or to do the sacraments or something. But we each have our own individual relationship with God. You don't need a priest to go talk to God for you. But at that time, he made them that offer. You can all talk to me. You can all be priests. Well, in Exodus chapter 20, verse 19, once God has finished his offer, they said, no, thank you. In verse 19, they said to Moses, you speak with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. Like, that's too frightening. We can't have thundering lightning every time we want to talk to God. And no. So we're good with it. Let God talk to you. You tell us what he said. So they gave it up. They let it go. Now, God wasn't shocked. God, oh my goodness. God sometimes does things on purpose so that we can turn it down, so that later we can't say, well, God, why didn't you offer me the chance to? I did. You said you didn't want it. That's why I gave it to that person. So you cannot complain now that that person's doing it, because you had the opportunity to make this choice or that choice, whatever it is, you turned it down. And he knew they would turn it down. So in verse 20, Moses is still trying to talk him into it, not knowing that God already knew this in advance. He says, and Moses said to the people, do not fear, for God has come to test you, that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin. The reason he's showing up with all this thunder and lightning is so that you'll be afraid to sin later. You realize, oh, there's an actual real God who will punish me if I sin. So that's what this is about, so that you actually have respect and fear of him which did not last. Okay, verse 21. So the people stood afar off, said, we hear you, but no thanks. So they let it go. The chance for all of you to be priests and have your own personal priest relationship, they said, not right now, no thank you. No, sir.
No, sir.
But Moses drew near the thick darkness where God was, it says. So they made their choice. They stood afar off. Moses went on in. All right. So Korah is saying, we're all holy. Moses thinking, no. So then he says, so why then do you exalt yourself above the assembly of the Lord? Like, why do you put yourself above us and single yourself out when we all have privilege? So let's go to what Korah's really concerned about. Here's the deal. And this is what I was trying to explain earlier. In Numbers chapter 3, verse 12, it says, now behold, I myself have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel. So I'm singling out the Levites, of which Korah was one. He said, instead of every firstborn who opens the womb among the children of Israel. So normally the firstborn gets the majority of the land, gets a double portion of the land, and they perform the rites for the family. So whatever God they were serving, the firstborn would be the one to go and try to appease that God. So that was their tradition. That's where they learned it from the Egyptians. He says, well, instead of continuing that, I'm going to have the Levites do it for you. And so God is diminishing the rights of the firstborn because you're not just born into it. You have to actually deserve it because it's what you want. Now, Reuben was firstborn. And so Reuben's kind of miffed at this because Reuben gave up his rights to act as firstborn and be the leader because Reuben's tribe, Reuben specifically, decided he was mad at his dad and he was going to go off and seduce one of his dad's wives and just to show I'm a man. You don't think I'm a man. I'll show you I'm a man. So he kind of lost his rights and privileges to be a leader because that's a childish thing to do. That's not a grown-up thing to do. And God is just re-emphasizing it. It has nothing to do with whether you're firstborn any longer. It has to do with those people who choose. And the Levites chose because when Moses came down with the 10 Commandments and saw everybody they created a calf, a golden calf, so they can go back to Egypt. Moses says, who's on the Lord's side? And all the Levites stood with Moses. And everyone else chose, we'd like this golden calf. We think this golden calf is much more powerful than God. And so so he says, okay, the Levites stick with me no matter what. So I'm choosing the Levites. Therefore, the Levites shall be mine. In Numbers chapter 3, verse 17, it says, so these were the sons of Levi. Levi had 3 sons, Gershon, Kohath, Merari. He had 3 sons. And so God divided up the responsibilities of the Levites in that order. In Numbers 3, verse 23, it says, the families of the Gershonites were to camp behind the tabernacle westward. Why does this make a difference? So if you imagine a square, the tabernacle is a square, it's really rectangle. On the east side is the best side because that's when the sun comes up in the morning. It rises in the east. Oh, okay. I have shaving cream in my ear. Thank you so much. People are writing in and saying, please get that foam out this man's ear so I can listen to the lesson and not be distracted. The east side was the best side because when the sun first shines, and that's where God put the door to the tabernacle in the east. So right in the morning, it would shine into the tabernacle. So whoever got to sit on the east side, that was the best side. The Gershons sat on the west side, opposite, like that's the worst place to sit. But he had to divide them up, right? Because there's 3 families, and then he had picked Aaron and Levi and gave them special treatment. So you sit on the west side, so they really had cause to complain. And then Numbers chapter 3, verse 25 says, the duties of the children of Gershon in the tabernacle included carrying the tabernacle and the tent with its covering. So whenever we have to go to a new place, you guys carry the tent. Those are your duties. Thank you very much. Now, nobody else got to touch the temple at all. At least you got to do something, but those are your duties. Those are your duties. In Numbers chapter 3, verse 35, it says, leaders of the father's house of the families of Merari, because there's 3 sons of Levi, you camp on the north side of the tabernacle. And the appointed duty of the children of Merari included the boards of the tabernacles. You carry all the screws and nuts and bolts and all of that stuff. Okay. But from Kohath, which Moses was from, which Korah is from, Korah is the one challenging him. It says, from Kohath came the family. Now, Kohath had himself 4 kids. So even though you're Kohath, your duties vary depending on who your daddy was. So they're the Amram, Izhar. Remember, Korah says, I'm from Izhar. There were the Hebronites and the Uzzielites. Okay. Amram is Moses' people. Izhar, who's the second born son, that's Korah's people. So he divided up their duty. So the families of the children of Kohath were to camp on the south side of the tabernacle. So if your Amram is your daddy and your Kohath is your grandfather, then you're Moses' team and you're on the east. If you're everybody else, the other 3 sons who are Kohaths, you're sitting on the south side. Well, guess who else sat in the south side? Reuben. When they divided up the 12 tribes and says 3 here, 3 here, 3 here, 3 here, Reuben sitting right behind the Kohaths, right behind Korah, right, and they're grumbling because Reuben and them like, we should be leaders, and Korah's like, well, I'm a Kohath, I should be a leader, and blah, 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 blah. And the people will get together and grumble. So it says, but the one who got to lead their side, because each side had a leader. It says the leader of the father's house of the family of the Kohathites was Elizaphan, the son of Uzziel, and he was the youngest. So Korah's really mad because Kohath had 4 sons. Yes, okay, Amram was the oldest, and that's Moses' daddy. Okay, but our dad was next, Izhar. Why don't we get to lead? You can take the youngest son and put him in charge, so he's already mad. And that's why when these things go through, when you read, and he begat this one, and this one begat, they're actually very important. They're not just there because they just need to fill up space. Moses didn't get paid by the word. And let me just write a whole bunch of stuff. They're trying to explain where the divisions come from and why this person got mad at that one. Okay, so the youngest son, his kids got to be in charge of everybody. So this was a problem. Okay, excuse me. So their duty included, I have a Kleenex. Their duty included the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altars. They got to handle all the furniture on the inside. Well, no, they didn't handle it. They got to carry it whenever they moved somewhere. They got to carry it. But as far as who could actually touch it, and again, even when you carried it, you had to put it on poles. You couldn't touch it. Somebody had to cover it. Somebody had to grab all the stuff. That was Moses' duty. In Numbers chapter 3, verse 32, Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, was to be chief over the leader. Oh, so, and again, anyway, that's Moses. You get to touch it, you get to collect it, you get to pack it. And the Kohens, you get to carry it. You're not carrying the tent, you're not carrying the nuts and bolts, you're carrying all the holy things. But Moses and them, they get to actually touch it. And, so this is a little bit of jealousy. Now, who gets to be leader over all the Levites? It says Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, was to be chief of the leaders of the Levites, with oversight over those who kept charge of the sanctuary. So he got to order everybody around. This is Korah's problem. When he says, well, who put you in charge? Well, God did. Okay. Numbers. But that's so you say, Moses. How do we know? God's not talking to us. Right, because you all voted and said, God, don't talk to us, talk to Moses. So yeah, you're going to have to take Moses' word for it, because whenever God comes down to talk, you don't want to hear it. So now Moses is doing his job, and they're like, well, who told you that? You did. You said, Moses, you talked to God. Okay. So Moses and them were sitting on the east. In Numbers chapter 4, verse 15, it says, and when Aaron and his sons had finished covering the sanctuary, when they had finished furnishing the sanctuary, when the camp is set to go, then the sons of Kohath, then the rest of them shall come to carry them, but they shall not touch any holy thing lest they die. So you can't really touch it, but at least you get to carry it on the poles. All right. And in fact, in verse 20 of Numbers chapter 4, it says, but he says, they shall not even go into watch while the holy things are being covered, lest they die. So you can't even, and then that creates mystery. Like, what are they doing in there? How come we can't go in there? We can't go. No, you can't even step inside. So that gives people just opportunity to make stuff up. If you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, then make it up. And that's what people have done to this day. So they did. They just made stuff up. Verse 4, so back to the lesson of Numbers chapter 16. So when Moses heard this, like when they're challenging him and say, well, who are you? He fell on his face. And and again, that's the sign of deep, oh my God, this is the worst thing. You're prostrating yourself in front of the person. Please, I'm doing all I can to stop you. There was a movie called The History of the World Part 2, a Mel Brooks movie. I did not like this movie. And I had a friend who knew I would not like this movie. And everybody has different sense of humor. But there was just stuff in the movie that this person knew that I would not like. But I hadn't seen it yet. And so my friend came and said, you're not going to like this movie. And no, I can't. I'm going to go see it. It's Mel Brooks. I always love Mel Brooks. When have I ever? Mel Brooks is the most hilarious person in the world. Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles. Come on. Why would I not like this movie? It's Mel Brooks. The person camped in my door, put their body, like, I'm telling you, you will hate this movie. I'm stopping you from going, and practically prostrated themselves, like showed up at my house, found out what time I was leaving, and like barricaded themselves in the door in order to, like, please don't go. I'm telling you, you're going to hate this. Well, I ignored that and went and hated it. And went, why did I not listen to this person they drove over to my house to stop me. Why would I not listen? Maybe they know something. Moses is on his face begging them, please listen to me. You're about to make a horrible mistake. So he falls on his face. Please, I'm telling you. And he spoke to Korah and all his company saying, okay, tomorrow morning the Lord is going to show who is his and who is holy, and will cause that person to come near to him. So I'm asking you to repent now, because he's going to show up tomorrow and he's going to let you know who's holy, because you're saying we're all holy. No, you gave that up. You aren't. There were conditions to it. There are things you had to go through before you can be in this specific type of position, and you refuse to do it. So actually you aren't holy. You're making decisions on your own. You're not listening to God. You have no relationship with God. You actually have no relationship with God. We do, because there are certain things we went through to make sure that we, could hear from God, like asking Jesus into our hearts. But they did none of that. So Moses is like, you make stuff up constantly. You have no idea what God's really saying, because he's not in you. God is in us. And you won't let his spirit come upon you. You say no whenever he shows up. So you are making things up. So I'm asking you to repent, because tomorrow God's going to show up. He's going to let you know something. So here's why Moses knew that there was a difference between the two of them. In Exodus chapter 28, verse 1, God says to Moses, now take Aaron, your brother, and his sons with him from among the children of Israel, that he may minister to me as priest. Aaron and Aaron's sons, right? And then in Exodus chapter 29, verse 1, he says, and this is what you shall do to them to hallow them, to make them holy, for ministering to me as a priest, to make them separate. Because in our cases, holy just means separate, sanctified, different than the world. There's different choices we make than the world, that we make because we serve God, we worship God. And God says, don't do that, and so we don't do it. If we're doing everything exactly like the world, then then we're just exactly like the world. If we talk and do everything like them, then we're not separate, right? We're still saved, but not sanctified. You can be saved, but not sanctified. And so here's what you're going to have to do. He's telling the priest to be separate for ministry. take one young bull, two rams without limit, and he gives him this whole ceremony that you need to go through, which was symbolic at that time, which was symbolic of your total commitment, your 100%. They had to go wash and water. They had to do all this stuff, and it was a physical, outward show of what God was trying to do spiritually, inwardly. It's a similar thing to us, right? So we go through baptism. Baptism does not make you holy, but it's symbolic of you saying, my old man is dead and buried in the water. And now when I come up, I'm this new person who listens to God. My old man wouldn't listen to God. My old man was like Korah and them and just doing my own thing. But my new person, I try to listen to God. And God says, don't do that or do this. I'm trying my best to listen. We're not perfect at it, but we're making that dedication to try to do that. Different than when before we were saved, when we just did whatever we want. We had no boss. I am the boss of me, So he tells them, Moses in chapter 16, verse 6, do this. Take censers, Korah, and all your company. Those little like bronze ashtray type things, and you put coals in them, and they would carry them on a chain. Take censers, Korah, you and all your company, put fire in them and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. It shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses, is the Holy One. Duh. So you take too much upon yourselves, you sons of Levi. So we'll find out. We'll all have our censers. We'll all have this fire as representing fire from the altar. And the altar, where the altar sacrifice, the altar, laid all on the altar. So we'll see which sacrifice God accepts. So we're going to kind of create little mini altars. And we'll see which sacrifice God accepts. Because God came down by fire and consumed the sacrifice. And that was their sign. Wow, okay, God's accepted our sacrifice. So we'll see what God does tomorrow, because you actually are the ones taking it too much on yourself. Verse 8. Then Moses said to Korah, but hear now, you sons of Levi, is it a small thing that to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself? Like, he's given you something to do. Why is that a small thing? The specific job God's given to you, you don't appreciate it because you get to carry the holy things, and we each have an assignment. My assignment is different than yours, and so we kind of have to learn not to belittle what assignment God has given us. We have to look at the gifts God has given us, the way he does use us. You can envy somebody else and say, oh man, I wish I had a worldwide ministry or something. In fact, too many people think they have a worldwide ministry and they don't. Too many people, that's their goal. My wife and I laugh sometimes because there's so many people who have an international worldwide outreach and they have like 6 followers. They have,
living room.
they're just in their living room, but they call it the international. And then again, the name of this is you take on too much. You're taking on too much. God wants you to reach in the world where you're at. If your ministry is just to your neighbor and you look after them and you check on them, I just heard the other day about a friend, who was keeping their eye on their neighbor and discovered that their mail hadn't been taken in 2 and 3 days, and called the police to make sure they're okay, and sure enough, they had fallen. They were on the floor, and they'd been on the floor for 2 or 3 days. But if this neighbor had not checked on them, because I said, oh well, thank God that neighbor went by and did all that. Well, how did the neighbor know? Well, because the mail hadn't gone in. And what you may consider nosiness, God may be God put that in you to check on, how come they haven't taken the mail for the past 3 days? Let me call somebody and see what's going on. If that saved that person's life, and if that's all that you did, was save that one person's life, you saved somebody's life. And that's your ministry. You don't have to have a worldwide ministry in order to be effective. God has given you someone. It could be your maybe it's just ministries for your kids, to make sure they're okay. Or who you don't know. It doesn't have to be this big thing in order to be effective. But sometimes we pass over the little thing God's put in front of us because we think it has to be this huge big thing in order to be God. And I have this argument with my friends all the time. about that. It's like what you're doing is God already. You're already doing, you're waiting for God to show you. God, you're already in the middle of what God wants you to do. Okay. So he says, is it a small thing to you that God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord and to stand before the congregation to serve him? That's a small thing to you? And that he's brought you near to himself, you and all your brethren, the sons of Levi with you. And are you seeking the priesthood also? So you also need to do what I'm doing. You can't just do what he gave you to do. Therefore, you and all your company are gathered together against the Lord. That's what he's saying. You're going against God. And what is Aaron that you complain against him? Like, why do you guys keep picking up poor Aaron? Okay. So, and Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram. Now, these are Reuben's people, the sons of Eliab. But they said, we will not come up. So that's on them. At least Korah showed up. My voice is dry. Oh, but I don't. Well, anyway. So, Korah and them showed up. Dathan, the people of Reuben, hey, Moses, I called them, hey, you guys come up. No, we will not come up. No, we're not going to listen to you. Sometimes we need to listen to people even if we disagree with them because they may have something life-changing for us. There are people in our lives we've already written off, don't want to hear from you. And purposely, God has put something in that person that will change our life. So in your enemy, God's going to put someone in your enemy. There's a group of people, there's a person, that God has given some information for you that can be life-changing for you. And he's not going to give it to anybody else. I'm telling you this. He puts it in that person. We know this from the story of David that when Saul was killed, the enemies of David, the enemies of Saul, one guy showed up, and David came and found this guy, and the guy said, "Oh, I'm from the group such and such a people," and that's David's enemies, and everybody, you should kill this person, but David doesn't kill them, and the man gives him information that saves David's life. And this is his enemy. But God, he had a piece of information that David needed and to win the war. And God put it in his enemy because he's told us to love our enemies, but we don't. We hate our enemies because, well, they're our enemies. But I promise you, if you just totally shut everybody off, if you refuse to listen to people that disagree with you, if you refuse to check out just in case they may have something good, you're going to miss out on something vital that God has put in that person that might help you. Now, they may have 99 things that are crazy, but they may have one thing that's good, and you're going to miss it because you're going to shut them up. So Moses calls them and come on up. No, we will not come up. So verse 13 is a small thing that you have. No, they ask him, is it a small thing that you have brought us out of a land flowing with milk and honey? And they're talking about Egypt. Like that was a land flowing with milk and honey. It's a lie. Or to kill us in the wilderness, that you should keep acting like a prince over us. Verse 14. Moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields or vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. No. And it's all your fault. You've not taken us to the land of the promised land. And actually, ironically, he had, and they refused to go in. And we will blame people for our own mistakes. We will put them on those people. And it's actually, we decided this. We made up the situation in our mind, but we say it's all your fault. You know, yes, I pushed you away, but I don't understand why you didn't come to me. Because you pushed me away. Oh, you didn't show up yesterday because you told me not to show up. And so we don't recognize a lot of stuff as our own fault, and that's why people are doing certain things. So, verse 15. Then Moses was very angry and said to the Lord, do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor have hurt one of them. Like, why are they challenging me? And Moses says to Korah, and God's not going to listen to Moses in that, he's going to do what he wants. But anyway, but Moses is a human. In fact, Moses is anger man. So but we'll go into that later. That's what gets him in trouble. And Moses says to Korah, okay, tomorrow you and all your company be present before the Lord, you and they as well as Aaron. Verse 17, Let each take a censer, put incense in it. So he explains it all again. Verse 18. So every man took a censer, put fire in it. It's the next day. And they laid incense on it. And they stood at the door of the tabernacle meeting with Moses and Aaron. So they're waiting. It's the next day. Yeah, we're going to see who God really likes. And verse 19. And Korah gathered all the congregation against them at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. So they're there. We're waiting at the tent that Moses has built. Now, Moses built, okay, anyway, so they're at the tabernacle meeting, right? God's glory shows up. Verse 20. First, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. Now, again, God is making sure, because he's still trying to train Moses to be compassionate about people. Yes, people deserve judgment. Yes, but he wants us to think, I hope you all die. I hope you. No, you don't, because if they all died, then you'd be upset. So he's trying to teach Moses to watch his word, because Moses came to him, don't you accept it? Kill them all. And okay, separate yourselves, then I'll kill them all. So he says that, and they fell on their faces, verse 22, and said, oh God, the God of spirits and all flesh, show one man's sin and you be angry with all the congregation. You're going to kill everybody because of them, which is how Moses often felt. Again, that's why Moses got in trouble and wasn't allowed to go into the promised land, because he never got over his anger problem and thinking, yeah, they should all die. Just kill them all. So when God would say Moses' words kind of back to him, he'd hear it and say, oh, no, that's terrible, God, don't do that. But Moses didn't ever really change. But anyway, so in this moment, he got Moses to repent. So, verse 23. So the Lord spoke to Moses saying, okay, well then speak to the congregation, saying, get away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. So some scholars believe that Korah and his group, and then Dathan and Abiram, which is Reuben's group, right, and they're sitting right behind each other on this the tent, built their own tent, built their own holy place. Like, okay, that's the tent, the tabernacle that Moses had then built. But we've got this huge tent also. You can come and worship God. You don't need to go there. Because apparently they would all gather at the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, and to speak to the congregation and saying, get away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And there's like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people there in the wilderness. A pair of them, a whole bunch of them would go to the wrong tent. That's the thing. Verse 25. Then Moses rose, went to Dathan, Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, depart now from these tents of these wicked men, because they built their own tents. Touch nothing of theirs, lest you be consumed in all their sins. Verse 27, so they got away from around the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the doors of their tents with their wives, their sons, and their children. Well, we're not moving. So everybody else got away. They listened. God always gives us a warning, always gives us a warning. And we sing, I'm not going to listen to that. You many times have gotten it might rain today. God gave you a warning of something. You should check your tire pressure or what. I don't know, whatever. Hey, watch out for that guy. He looks like suspicious. And you think, not going to listen.
You have no power.
Yes. So they listened, but Dathan and Abiram got even more irritated with God and like, more defiant. We'll just stand right here. What you gonna do? Verse 28, Moses says, okay, by this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them at my own will. I really am just following God's order. Because if it was up to me, I would never even gone to Egypt in the first place. I had a house out here in the wilderness. I was good. So I don't really want to be here. But this is how you'll know that God has chosen me and not you. Verse 29, if these men die naturally like all men, like if they live for the next 40 years and then just die natural deaths, or if they're visited by the common fate of all men, then the Lord's not sent me. But if the Lord creates a new thing and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up, with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit. They don't die first. They're alive and fall into the pit. Somebody's going to the pit. Then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord. So I know you can't tell, but here's be a big sign. The earth suddenly opens up and swallows them, or they live to their 80. Now, it came to pass, as he finished speaking, excuse me, all these words, that the ground split apart under them. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all the men with Korah, with all their goods. So everybody followed Korah and everybody else. Okay. Here's what's good. Korah, some of Korah's own kids left him too. So it means everybody who stayed with Korah. But some of Korah's own kids says, Daddy crazy. So we know this because in Numbers chapter 26, verse 10 and 11, it's when they recount what happened, it says, the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed them together with Korah when that company died, when the fire devoured 250 men and they became a sign. Nevertheless, the children of Korah did not die. Not because God just went over them, because when Moses said, move away from those crazy people, they moved away from the crazy people. In Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 9 and 10, it says, and here's why. Here's why. God gave a rule, says, you shall not bow down to them nor serve them, talking about serving other gods. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. So you're going to repeat their sins. I'm visiting their sins. I'm seeing their sins happen again. You're going to repeat their same sins for those who hate me, for those who aren't listening to my warnings, for those who are defiant. You're going to end up repeating the same sins. You're going to do the same things. Your dad was an alcoholic. You'll be an alcoholic if you hate me, because if you love me, then you'll have compassion in your heart for your forebears, your parents, grandparents who did wrong. You'll have compassion for them, and you'll be able to see why they did what they did and you won't repeat their mistakes because you'll love them. But if you hate them, ironically, you're going to end up doing the very same things that they did. They're so stupid. I would never do. And you're going to end up doing the very same things because your heart's not open to me. Your heart's not open to them. You have no compassion on them, and you won't understand why they made the mistake, and you'll just end up making the same mistakes. But it says, showing mercy to thousands of generations to those who love me and keep my commandments. So if you love me, your parents could be crazy, your grandparents, whoever. But if you love me, you won't repeat their mistakes because I'll open up compassion in your heart for them, and you'll see why they made the mistakes, and you won't follow their mistakes. And plus, you'll be somebody who listens to me, who obeys me. And when I warn you and you say, oh, well, make sure you do this or that, because you love me, you'll listen to my warnings, and you won't end up falling in their same pathway. Okay. So we know that Samuel, for example, and it says so in 1 Chronicles 6, and I won't read it. Excuse me. We know that Samuel was from the tribe of Korah. Samuel the prophet, who anointed David, his ancestor, he was a son of Korah. He wasn't one of his sons, but great-great-grandson of Korah. So all the sons of Korah weren't consumed at that point. Thank goodness a lot of his kids listened to him, but a whole bunch of people did. Verse 33. So it says, so they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. If only the pit had stayed open, and you could look down and go, oh my God, and they could try to crawl, help us. Nope, the ground closed back up. So it was done. Sorry, they're in the bowels of the earth, so you can't even look at them and feel sorry for them. They made their choice. Did not God show up and said, get away from them? And you said, no, why? I don't need to get away from them. Okay. So then all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up also. We better get out of here. Verse 35, and a fire came out from the Lord and can consume the 250 men who were offering incense. So we got Reuben's kids. We got, and not all of his kids. We got Korah and his followers, and then the 250 leaders who said, "We're backing Korah against you, Moses." Fire came down and devoured them. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Now tell Eleazar, verse 37, the son of Aaron the priest, to pick up the censers out of the blaze, for they're holy." I'm really upset with that.
Gather my stuff.
Yeah, get my stuff. People are on fire. I'm sorry. So go get the censers out of the blaze, because that's my stuff. For they are holy, and then scatter the fire some distance away. So the censers of these men who sinned against their own souls, let them be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar. So I understand that they're ashes now, but I still need my stuff. Because they presented them before the Lord. Therefore, they are holy, and they shall be assigned to the children of Israel. So I'm just going to make new stuff from their stuff. Okay. So Eleazar the priest took the bronze censers, which those who were burned up had presented, and they were hammered out as a covering on the altar. That's why we need to read the whole Bible, because there's some good stuff in here that people don't preach about. To be a memorial to the children of Israel that no outsider who is not a descendant of Aaron should come near to offer incense before the Lord, that he might not become like Korah and his companions. That's the error of Korah. Okay.
Gainsaying, of course.
The gainsaying of, the talking back. Gainsaying is the talking back. The gainsaying of Korah, that's his error. That, because it talks about don't let this happen to you. So they even took the censers from the people who had burnt up and put them on the altar, so that people, and made them, decorate, so people will know, don't touch God's stuff, please. Okay. Now, on the next day, and I'm almost done, verse 41, all the congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You have killed the people of the Lord." Really? Now it happened when the congregation had gathered against Moses and Aaron that they turned toward the tabernacle meeting, and suddenly the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord appeared again. Then Moses and Aaron came before the tabernacle of meeting, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Get away from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." And they fell on their faces because, okay. So Moses said to Aaron, now they're being challenged personally, right? And whenever they were challenged personally, Moses and Aaron would get angry, and I can't believe they're attacking me, and blah, 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 blah. So he still has to teach them. People are still going to attack you personally, Moses, and your first thought has to be to pray for them, and not, "Ooh, Lord, I hope you wipe them all out." When you don't like what people are doing, it'd be great if your first thought was, "Let's pray for those people that I don't agree with what they're doing." If that be your first thought, instead of, "Ooh, I hope the earth opens up and swallows them." Now, the earth can still open up and swallow them, but at least your first thought was, "Lord, save them, help them, protect them, because they know not what they do." That's what Jesus was doing on the cross. Forgive them, Lord. They don't know what they're doing. They're not doing it on purpose. If they knew better, then they wouldn't be doing that. So Moses said to Aaron, "Take a censer and put fire in it from the altar. Put incense on it and take it quickly to the congregation. Make atonement for them, for the wrath has gone out from the Lord." So the Lord is, like, judgment is coming toward those people. We can see what they're doing. And, those drug dealers, those this, those that. Judgment is coming toward those people. But our first thought should be to pray for them, and not, go get them, sick them, Lord. So Aaron took it as Moses' commandment and ran into the midst of the assembly, and already the plague had begun among the people. So he put in the incense and made atonement for the people, and he stood between the dead and the living. So the plague was stopped. Now those who died in the plague were 14,700, besides those who died in the Korah incidents. So Aaron returned to Moses at the door of the tabernacle meeting, for the plague had stopped. So again, trying to teach them, because over and over, there's going to be 40 years in the wilderness. The people are going to come at Moses and Aaron for 40 years. So when they mess up, know that God's going to judge them. You don't have to judge them. We think that we have to come at people, that we have to tell them off, that we have to cuss them out, that we have to attack them. God sees what they're doing, and God's coming at them. When people are acting ignorant, our first thought should be, "Lord, help that person." If we're on the side of righteousness, then we don't have to always defend ourselves and vindicate, you know, because we can think, wow, that poor person, they just don't know. Bless their heart and pray for them. But don't worry, God sees what they're doing. God's gonna, because sometimes we think, well, if I don't do it, God, it's not gonna happen. No, don't worry, God sees. God sees. But he's just trying to change Moses and Aaron. This needs to be your first attitude and not, oh man, I hope they all die. Uh, and so that we, because he wants us to be intercessors. He wants us to pray for people because we never know somebody's heart can be turned. Somebody that we've given up on. I hope God wipes them out. That may be somebody that had we had a heart of compassion toward us, God might have led us to that person to pray for them or to change their heart. But we've already given up on that group, then God can't use us to change that heart before judgment comes. Because God doesn't want judgment, he wants mercy on that person. But we're his instruments on earth. Because if God has to show up in their room, they are going to burn up. So he wants to send us to that person. But if we've already given up on them, then we don't stand between the dead and the living like Moses did and stop the plague that's on them. We wish the plague would happen faster, and God's not able to use us. So he's training Moses and Aaron. I still want to use you to go to those people. Jesus, up until while he was on the cross, still kept trying to witness to people, still kept talking to them, still kept using scriptures to help change them. And he knew judgment was coming on them, but he never stopped trying to reach them. So that has to be our attitude ultimately, is even if the people are messing up, even if they're crazy, we still need to have compassion because judgment is coming on them. But maybe God can use us in some way to help them or change a mind or two. Okay, I'm all done. Thank you so much for the time in Numbers chapter 16. It's all good. The Bible's good to me. So on Wednesday, I'm in the book in the New Testament. For the some of you actually listen to me twice a week. Bless your hearts. Some of you think, oh, I can take one lesson a week and that's fine. So, but just in case, I just want you to know that we're in the book of Luke on Wednesdays. All right, thank you so much, and I'll talk to you again soon. All right, bye-bye.